Welcome everyone to episode 3 of the Batman vs. James Bond show. I am your host Brian Thomas, thanks for joining me. This is the show where we discuss everything related to Batman and James Bond movies, sometimes news, trailers, scores, reviews, matchups, and more. First off, I'd like to thank everyone who has been tuning in since episode 1, and for all you new listeners out there, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Nice to have you. Take a seat, grab a beer, whatever you drink. Enjoy the show, maybe a little bit of popcorn Twizzlers. Today it is coffee, black coffee for me that I made, my lovely wife made for me all the way up at 10 a.m. and it is now time of recording, 5:44 in the afternoon. Anywho, a couple things before we get started I'd like to mention. Number 1, please subscribe to the Batman vs. James Bond show on iTunes and leave a nice little review for me. I'd really much appreciate that. Number 2, at the time I am recording this, we are only less than, drumroll, 5 days away from Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice premiere. That's right, yeah. Almost did the Batman voice there. I decided not to do it because you guys, I like to save that for, before I scare all the listeners away. Anywho, I am beyond stoked for this movie. Let me just say, if you can't tell how enthusiastic I am, that's not just the caffeine, that's just how ready I am for this movie. I mean, it's no secret that, if I haven't told you, I'm going to talk about this later on in the episode. And I was debating about it. There's a little movie that is, very debatable right about now. It's called, Man of Steel. And that came out back in 2013. A little movie about Superman and all the destruction that he caused and how it caused an internet outrage by the fans, nerds, and all because of a whole bunch of little things. But, we'll talk about that in a little while, but I did want to say that I will be doing a 2-part episode review breakdown of Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice next week. That will be episode 4, and we'll call it 4 and 4.5 anyway. One will be a non-spoiler episode, and the other will be a full spoiler episode. So of course, for those of you that just want get an idea before you see the movie, I'll give you a little insight on it. I won't give you any of the details. For those of you that did see the movie, maybe once, maybe I've seen it twice by the time that I recorded that, we can get down to all the dirty and we can just spoil. We can have all kinds of discussion about this. I can share my thoughts on it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for this movie, guys. I mean, if you are a Batman fan or just, even if you're against Ben Affleck and you just want to see a good Batman movie, then like I said, we'll get into that in a little while. Anyway, please stay tuned for that. So, lots and lots to get to this week, as always. Before we hop into the news, let me just say this. Like I said, my anticipation level is about as high as it gets. It hasn't been this high probably since the last James Bond movie with Spectre. Because as you can tell in the episode title, it is the Batman versus James Bond show. See what I did there? I usually do something like a little countdown, if you will. It's kind of hard because I was going to do it. I was going to go back and watch like all the Batman movies that, as many as I could before all this. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I don't want to do a comparison of those Batman movies to the new upcoming Batman because it's a tomato kind of thing. There's no comparison. I mean, sure, it's, Bruce Wayne, it's, the black cape and the costume in there. You got a Batmobile, you got Alfred, but we have to kind of, and I've touched on this last week also, we kind of have to clear our minds of that and just remember, we have a new Batman. We have to be open to what the new interpretation is going to be. I mean, a lot of us are going to be judgmental because if you're like me, you paint a picture of what you see. When I say paint a picture, when I watch a trailer, when I watch a TV spot, I'm looking at it and, if you're like me, you watch it over and over again and you kind of formulate like what the movie's going to possibly be. And then sometimes what happens is you get to the movie theater, you watch the movie and it's just like, that didn't turn out how I had planned, or maybe I would have done something differently. And, and that's how it is. I mean, a director and a writer, and I say director and writer because those are the two main parts of a movie. At least I feel they are. Sure, the actors are important because they're the ones on screen portraying that part, that character. But at the same time, they're the ones that came up with the story. They tweaked it. They, threw out some ideas and they've said, oh, this is our plan. This is what we're going to go with. Here's what we're going to do. And, hopefully we like what they have. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Not everybody liked Michael Keaton Batman. Not everybody liked the Dark Knight trilogy. Not everybody, liked Batman and Robin. I'm sorry, had to throw it out there. Some people did. For those of you that did, hats off to you. I mean, as long as you are a fan of Batman, that's all I say. Same happens with the James Bond movie. I mean, not everybody's liked the interpretation of, like, say, Daniel Craig era. Not everybody liked the interpretation of, say, Roger Moore. I mean, it's up to you. Not every person, anybody who fills the character, and when I say the character, I'm saying the character of, say, Bruce Wayne / Batman. Anybody who fills the tux of James Bond, it's going to have to be different, because in all fairness to the actors, that, they have to put their own spin on this, on what they feel the character is. And like I said, that goes all the way back to the writer and the director, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are saying, this is what I want, this is how it's going to be. So, yeah, I'm, even watching, I was, in the restaurant today, and on TV, what do they have but Batman Begins? And I'm watching that, and I'm like, boy, that is such a good Batman movie. I mean, I'm like stopping in my tracks like a little kid, who's watching Saturday morning cartoon, and I'm like, man, just you go back to that, and that was back in 2005, and it's just like, wow. I mean, we never knew that at the time, like about 11 years later, that we were going to get, a whole new Batman. At that time, that was a new Batman, and we, all the Batman fans are just like, well, this is a new interpretation. When I went to see a movie, I'm like, this is not Michael Keaton, but I can get down with this. You have a whole new, whole new cast of characters in here that are portraying parts that we've come to know and love. A new Batmobile, new bat suit, for example, which we'll get into later about best bat suits. But yeah, I mean, just remember this, and I'm definitely a strong proponent for saying this. At least I that by now, hopefully that I am a Nolan fan, Christopher Nolan fan, that is. If it weren't for his films, whether you like them or not, though, we wouldn't be where we are right at this current point of having a new Superman, for one, because him and David, what's the guy's name? David S. Goyer. Yes. They're the ones who penned the first original Man of Steel sequel as they were filming The Dark Knight Rises, or as they were prepping for The Dark Knight Rises. They're like, oh, hey, guess what? I have an idea, but it's a Superman film. And that ended up being Zack Snyder's, project, if you will. But at the same time, Nolan produced it and wrote it, and it had that feel of a Christopher Nolan film. But now we have a new Batman, and because of all that, everything that happened in the Dark Knight trilogy, and Snyder's definitely a fan of Christopher Nolan's, and you have, you can tell in Ben Affleck's interviews that he is a fan as well, that, where we are right now with the comic book movie industry, because of that trilogy is where we are right now. Now, whether it will be as good, it's going to, like I said, different film, different era, who knows? But, my fingers are so crossed right now. I want this to be good. Anyway, at the time of at the time of recording this episode, excuse me, they are actually holding the Batman vs. Superman premiere, and I'm getting updates. My Twitter is blowing up right now because I subscribe to the Batman v Superman on Twitter, and, any notifications I get, though. So, it's, I think they'll probably, if they're like any other premiere, you'll probably be able to catch it on YouTube or somewhere on the internet anyway. But it's just cool. You're seeing like Zack Snyder's, getting there, Harry Lennox, Jesse Eisenberg and so forth. But, let's hop into some news right now. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff to get to, and I don't want to, go too far with my rants and raves and so forth. So hang on a second. Here's some news. All right, news this week. I did miss a story last week that I really wanted to touch on, especially for, future installments of Batman movies, because right now all we're talking about and hearing about is Justice League. But, before all this Justice League talk, it was about, okay, when is the next solo Batman film going to be? Well, good news for everybody is that Ben Affleck was interviewed with Entertainment Weekly, by Entertainment Weekly, and he was saying that a solo Batman movie is in development. He quoted saying, "There's definitely willingness and a will and a desire to make a solo Batman movie on the part of Warner Brothers. It's in development, and right now I'm really focused on finishing Live by Night." That's one of his next upcoming projects. I believe he is directing that. Remember, he is not only an actor, but he is a very good director. That's where my focus is, and I tend to be a one movie at a time guy. So when I'm finished with this movie, I'll then focus on my next movie and figure out what that will be. So what does that mean, guys? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out saying, okay, well, he wants to do his passion project, and, God love him, kudos to him for doing that, because he's not just going to be, he doesn't want to just be typecast as Batman, even though he is, obviously. And he was in such a great interview this past week on Ellen. I don't know I know you guys probably might watch the show. Even if you don't, you probably happen to see it on social media. I did tweet it out. He's there doing an interview with Ellen. And one of the funniest things about the interview was that Ellen's playing it very casual, and something brought up about Wonder Woman. All of a sudden, out of this box pops this lady, this bigger lady, in a Wonder Woman costume, and scared the living hell out of Ben Affleck. And they went back and replayed this, and he was out of his mind scared. It was hilarious. But another part of the interview, he was saying that, he has a 4-year-old son, and he was saying that his son thinks that he is Batman. And, when he was going to record the Ellen show, that he was actually at the Batcave. It's really cute, especially, I don't have kids. I want kids sooner or later. Quick story. But, to be looked up to as Batman by your kids, that's got to be something else, something to be proud of. So going forth with that, Ben Affleck obviously is a, well, he's not an Academy Award winning director. He's won Academy Awards before for writing and for producing Argo, and Good Will Hunting. Now, it's always been up in the air whether he's going to do a Batman movie. It makes sense. You have, a studio who you won an Oscar for, and which was Argo, and they have faith in you, and they are also the same studio, Warner Brothers, that are producing the Batman versus Superman, Justice League movies. So if you put it all together in your head, what does that mean? They're probably in negotiations right now. It's like, okay, you do one for us, we do one for you, and so forth. And the same thing happens with, like, say, Clint Eastwood, Christopher Nolan, whether it is, Joss Whedon, whoever else. They all do studio. You have to have a big studio blockbuster film. Sometimes I think that's the point it comes down to. And then if you want to do your smaller movie, your not so big, big budget movie, then they'll do it that way. So when will this Batman movie happen? I honestly have no idea. For some reason, the date or the year of 2019 sticks in my mind, but, if they're getting ready to film Justice League starting next month in April, then it sounds like the Batman movie is obviously going to happen after that. But the question would be is, how are they going to do a Batman movie? Are they going to do it more? Because Ben Affleck, I believe he's 43 years old. You have a Joker that you're setting up in Suicide Squad. So sooner or later, those two are going to have to meet, or they're, in this era or in this cinematic universe, the two characters have already met. If you go back and look at the trailers, You Let Your Family Die and so forth. And it would be really, if they were going to do a Batman movie, right, first you got to try to have Ben Affleck directed. Then you have to have Jared Leto fit in there as well, too. Whether it's a past of maybe how Robin died. If Robin, if my assumptions are correct and Robin did die, and that's kind of why Batman put up his cape, something had to have caused him to retire all of a sudden, because, he's Batman. He never stopped at anything. Maybe he caught the Joker and he's like, okay, well, that's it. So something, had to cause him to do that. So we'll see what happens with that, as I always like to say. We'll stay tuned for that. Next bit of news on here. This one was really interesting, and it was about the producer, and his name is Charles Roven. Now, if you don't know the name, that's okay. But you do know his movies, considering he was actually the producer for the Dark Knight trilogy. He is now the producer of Batman vs. Superman. He was a producer for Man of Steel as well, too. If you had a chance to check out the Twitter feed, I did post it, and the bottom line is that he was saying that, Ben Affleck was their first choice and their only choice when they decided to do this movie. If you didn't know this, it was originally pitched by Zack Snyder about, okay, what do we do after Man of Steel? Because obviously you got to get the cinematic universe rolling. And then Snyder's like, well, what if Batman's in it? And, Batman is kind of like going up against Superman. And dating back to God knows how long, this has always been kind of like teased with us. Like, if you ever saw the movie I Am Legend, if you look in the very beginning of that movie, pretty good movie, Will Smith. Will Smith is driving into an empty New York, but in Times Square you see this movie poster of a Batman versus Superman, and it's the old Batman logo and it's the Superman logo, but it was teased to us then. I think this was back in like 2008, 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And now what do you see all over Times Square about nothing but Batman versus Superman all over the place, which is kind of ironic in a way. I think they did it on purpose because, they knew it was going to happen sooner or later. But going back though, it was always, apparently this was who they had chosen. They wanted somebody who was, because Henry Cavill, I don't know exactly how tall he is. I mean, he's a pretty tall dude. I'd say he's about 6'2". Ben Affleck, I know for a fact, is about at least 6'4", maybe 6'5". He's a huge guy. So they wanted somebody who was a little older, obviously, that could compete with Superman to a point, like, just like not just in size, but age, wisdom, and so forth. Henry Cavill is about 32 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So, and Ben Affleck has all those traits. At the time, they just finished wrapping up Dark Knight Rises and so forth. And Argo, they're like, okay, put our people in touch. We need to get our people. And I'm talking about Charles Rove, and he's saying, we need to get in touch with Ben Affleck's people and kind of see if he would like to do this, because we work at the same studio, so there's no reason why we can't get some of these pieces in place and, at least, let them hear us out. So obviously you see where we are today. Everything worked out, hopefully for the best, I'd like to think. Anyway, like I said, you have an older Batman, which is, I think he's the oldest person to portray Batman, so far anyway. I don't know how old Christian Bale was. That's a good trivia question. How old was Christian Bale in The Dark Knight Rises? If any of you know that, email me at batmanvjamesbond@gmail.com or tweet me at batmanversusbond. Let me know. If not, I'll find out for you guys. Talking about the whole, Justice League and, what, Zack Snyder had been planning and so forth, that leads me into the next story here. So Zack Snyder, of course, he's doing all the press that, this guy has got to be exhausted. I mean, he's been prepping this movie for at least a couple years now, and now he's getting ready to go do it all over again after all this press. And, like I said, less than 5 days out. And then in a month, he gets less than a month break, but I'm not saying we should feel too sorry for him, because, I think he's earned his pay, and, he's earned his rest at the same time too, but comes with being a director. Snyder was talking to the website Collider, and, he revealed a few things about, Batman v Superman, about something that was cut that we almost got. Now, I found this really interesting right before I started recording. It turns out that he quoted, "The Joker and the Riddler both came close to being in the movie. We talked about the possibility of putting them in. Chris Terrio, the screenwriter, and I talked about it a lot and felt that their mythological presence is felt in the movie, and that's cool. But I didn't want to get my eye too far off the ball because I needed to spend the time, frankly, with Batman and Superman to understand the conflict." Now, let that sink in a little bit. And, not only... Here's the thing with the new movie, or a lot of the new movies, especially like with James Bond movies, Batman movies, whatever type of movies that you also watch. It's all about, sometimes it usually starts off with the first movie, say Man of Steel. We'll take that. You set up your main character, and you kind of show how he came about to be and so forth. And, it's more focus is spent time on him. But now you're going into what we'll call it an unofficial sequel to, say, Man of Steel or whatever. But it's also at the same time you're introducing the character of Batman. So imagine if they would have thrown these characters in the mix, because first of all, we have Wonder Woman being added. You might see a couple guest spots from somebody else from the Justice League. We don't know yet. You're throwing in Jesse Eisenberg. You got Lex Luthor. So that's at least 3 big characters: Batman, Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor. And then you want to throw in, okay, spoiler alert, if you didn't see the second trailer to Batman vs. Superman, it's Doomsday at the very end. And, it's like, okay, well, how many more characters can you fit into this? Because you have minor characters that also need film time, but you have to establish something, which is Batman, and let him, we're kind of seeing it from his side, the way that they're showing it anyway. But at the same time, it's Batman versus Superman. And yeah, it's Dawn of Justice. I mean, not my first choice for the title. I would have rather just been Batman versus Superman. Would have been a whole lot easier with the marketing campaign. But I guess you can still hashtag Batman v Superman, whatever. If you throw in the Joker and the Riddler, I mean, we know that the Joker's in that world, but the Riddler, that's an interesting choice. Because all I keep thinking about is the Jim Carrey Riddler. And sometimes they would be, I don't know, if you played the Batman Arkham Knight game, you saw how they portrayed the Riddler in there. That would have been interesting, but I don't think that it's too many characters, and that like I said, that falls into a problem with a lot of movies. Go back and look at, like, say, Dark Knight Rises, or even The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight was titled The Dark Knight, but and while he was a supporting character, the Joker stole the show in that movie. And, and that's fine. That's great. I mean, deservedly so. Heath Ledger, stole the show in that movie. If we look at Dark Knight Rises, well, you're throwing in, let's see, Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. You're throwing in Joseph Gordon-Levitt as John Blake, a.k.a. Robin. You're throwing in Bane, Tom Hardy, and whoever else. And it's just like, okay, well, let's not forget what we're trying to do here, at least in the movie, because that's where everything can get lost. So, Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio, you got to give them kudos, because they're like, okay, well, this is the direction we're going to take our movie. Let's not worry about too many things at a time. And you got to wonder how much the studio had say in this, because it's always a problem. And this is where, you guys can get into your DC versus MCU fanboys and nerds or whatever. It's all about setting up the cinematic universe. First of all, I hate when they say setting up a cinematic universe. You worry about one film at a time. You really have to. If you're going to do something right, you have to do it. Just let's focus on one movie. If we can get a sequel, if everybody enjoys that movie, then move on to the sequel, and then see what happens. It doesn't always have to be, oh, well, let's just tie it into this and throw in as many characters as possible and not worry about the story. Action's great, but it all comes down to a story. At least that's my opinion anyway. So, going back into the whole Justice League thing too, and like I said, it is called Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. The Justice League movie, it's been teased by Zack Snyder as well. He was saying that they have a working title right now. It is just Justice League. He said, actually, I'm in the phase that I've been drawing logos and I've been drawing title treatments and stuff like that to try and figure out what it means, what Justice League is visually. So we'll see if the name evolves with this visual presentation. The schedule's close. It's not quite as long, but give or take, we have a more efficient machine in England because we have a big backlot that we built for Gotham and Metropolis. So it'll be easier to photograph when you have to close down the streets, but it's a beautiful backlot. Now, here's an interesting thing I took from this interview also. He said Snyder also commented on the Batman v Superman logo he designed himself. Little food for thought there. The Batman v Superman logo I drew so long ago. I knew there's versions of it that existed anyway, but that one in particular I drew. The one that's kind of cool about the Batman suit and our Batman logo is the dimension is the same as the Man of Steel logo, the bottom of the bat. So I said, no, it's cool. It's okay. It's mythologically okay. So, like I said, there was the one, I'll keep going back to this, the old school Batman v Superman logo that was out, or Batman versus Superman logo that was out there. Kind of like your typical 1989 Batman logo. And then you kind of insert the Superman logo. Well, apparently he ended up designing this one that we saw. Pretty cool, though. I mean, if you, like I said, Zack Snyder, you got to respect him to a point. Anyway, I mean, even if you aren't a fan, I'm becoming a fan. Couple more things with news that I did want to address in here, because we're running short on time, and I might have to go a little longer with this because we are only a week away from Batman v Superman. There, I said it. He was talking about, we're still talking about the rated R cut. It's going to be 30 minutes longer. It's not so much going to be, there's no nudity. It's not a hard rated R. He was saying it's just going to be a little bit more violent. It just tips the scale. So I probably will still buy the rated R version. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I don't need to see much more violence. If it adds to the story and creates something different, I'm all for it. But one story that I did really want to get to, that I think you guys will really enjoy. And like I said, I know I said we're going to talk Batman movies and James Bond movies on here. This is classified as a Batman movie because it's called Batman the Killing Joke. What makes it different is that it's actually a cartoon. Now, I have no problem covering this kind of news, because I'd like to get more into Batman on that aspect. I remember watching the Batman cartoons, the Batman, the animated series as I was growing up. I watched Batman Beyond, loved them both. I never had a chance to watch the actual Batman cartoon movies or the Justice League. So like I said, if it falls into the movie category, then I don't see why I can't cover this. What I like about this is that, this is the same guys that have been lending their voice to the Batman animated series and as well to the video game series. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. If you don't know those names, first of all, if you're not a Star Wars fan, then, well, shame on you also, but that's okay. This is a Batman James Bond show. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, duh. Kevin Conroy, who is to the ever popular nerd or God-loving nerd, is, how would I say it? He is the voice of Batman. He really is. He was doing it, in pretty much everything, all the Batman Arkham games aside from one, I think it was Arkham City. They're going to be putting their, lending their voices in Batman the Killing Joke. I heard that is a really graphic, very graphic comic book, novel. Something I'd like to check out. After all this dies down, then maybe we can get into that more. Switching gears a little bit here. Before I do that, see, I'm going all over the place today. One last thing of Batman news. This was a poll that I found online. It was for Collider.com, and it was talking about the best Batman suit. And I'll tweet out the link one more time if you guys want. And pretty much is, what's your favorite Batman suit? And it goes all the way back to Batman that I never knew about. Like I said, I like to consider myself as a Batman fan, but there was a Batman back in 1943 and 1949. There were two different Batman costumes there as well, and they're like unofficially the first Batman movies, I guess, or officially. Like I said, the first Batman movie that I really considered, more like my first Batman movie was Batman 1989 with Michael Keaton. Tim Burton directed it. They have everything from, the Adam West 1966 Batman costume on there, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and of course The Dawn of Justice. So there's a lot of costumes to vote for on there. I'd really like to hear what you guys think is your favorite Batman costume. Let me know at Batman versus Bond and tweet me what's your favorite, or email me at batmanvjamesbond@gmail.com. Let me know what you think, and we'll cover that a little bit more next week or in the near future. Switching gears here, throw another name into the mix for you James Bond fans. Who could be the next James Bond? Last week we were saying about how Tom Hardy was the top choice. Now throwing in a new name, Aidan Turner. And I'm sorry if I pronounced his name incorrectly. He's actually an Irishman. He's on BBC's latest adaptation of Poldark. Never heard of it before. But apparently, and this is, been confirmed by numerous sources, that he's 32 years old. Like I said, he's Irish, and he flew over to Los Angeles recently to meet with Bond producers Barbara Broccoli, and Michael G. Wilson last week. It was claimed. The newspaper cites a source saying Aidan has held preliminary talks with Bond producers, and being in LA will give him a further chance to discuss the role. So, not much is known about this guy, but I will say that, it's still too early to tell about what's going to happen with this. Let's just say, this story is true. Let's just say that this 32-year-old guy, Aidan Turner, did end up going to meet with producers. Then if that is true, then it's like, okay, well, maybe the producers have just had it with, and, they're just like, okay, Daniel Craig had a great run as James Bond. He gave us a nice outing, a good way to tie it up. And it's just like, okay, well, and he's getting older, and maybe he's just getting all about the money, the way his attitude is. So that's just maybe it's now time to change pace. Let's go find a younger James Bond and just do a new story. And then, thanks, Daniel. Peace out. Love you. And thanks for all the love. So, so right now, as it stands, we'll add this name, Aidan Turner. We'll do some more research next week, hopefully, or in the next couple weeks when we find out more. Michael Fassbender's still on the list. Tom Hardy, Idris Elba, Damian Lewis, and Tom Hiddleston, who was also added last week. So, we're not going to have any trailers because there's new TV spots, but I can't really go into that just for more time purposes because there's a few other things I want to get into tonight. So let's hop into what I would like to call the March Madness bracket. All right, so if for any of you basketball fans out there, honestly, I'm not a basketball fan, but this gave me a great idea of what something we could do, especially that, since something on here on the show I do is called the Death Match of the Week. So instead of, we're going to put the Death Match of the Week on hold temporarily, because it is March Madness, and for you non-basketball fans out there, all it is just competition, a whole bunch of teams, and, best team wins, so forth, but they formulate it into brackets. Now, pretty much all it is it's obviously what it sounds, the Batman versus James Bond matchup single elimination. We'll call this 2016, and hopefully we'll have one next year as well. One side has nothing but all Batmans. All the different Batmans are the actors who portrayed him, and all of the villains in there too. And like I said, even if it was a different Joker, then I made sure I separated that too. When it came into the James Bond side, I put all the different James Bonds on there, all the major villains. Now there was only 53 that I could do total in here, just because that's, if I wanted to put minor characters, which I decided not to do, this was the best way I could do this. I put the character of Ernest Stavro Blofeld by himself, even though there's been at least 3 to 4 actors to portray that. I think it kind of works out well because in the way that, he's kind of the same guy at the, some could say that about the Joker, but I decided that this might be the best way to do that. So here's some matchups for you guys. And, this is the first round, and there's a few to get to. So that's why I want to kind of cut it off tonight. So the first one's going to be Batman Michael Keaton versus the Joker. That is Batman Michael Keaton versus the Joker Jack Nicholson. Let me know who you would think would win on that. I can say that it's probably going to be Batman, and the only reason I would choose that one is just because, it was very simple. Batman did beat the Joker in that one. Joker kind of fell from a building, and there was no coming back for him. So, plain and simple with that. But, I want to hear what you guys have to say, so I can't just do this on my own. The next one is Catwoman Michelle Pfeiffer versus the Penguin, which was played by Danny DeVito. This is all from Batman Returns. I think that would be a really tricky one if you would, Catwoman has 9 lives, but she is kind of clever at the same time. Penguin, I would say Penguin is smart, but at the same time, I think if this comes down to actual deathmatch, I think Catwoman would easily win. Let's face it. Penguin's fat, chubby, and kind of slow. Catwoman is, full of, kind of martial arts moves and could, really do something with those nails. And I would not do any complaining about that, as long as she lets me live. So that's another one. The Riddler, this is number 3. The Riddler which was portrayed by Jim Carrey, and Two-Face by Tommy Lee Jones in Batman Forever. I gotta say, it's probably gonna be Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face in there. While they're not my favorite villains, the Riddler was more all about the little antics, the little games and so forth. He wasn't so much as a kind of like strong baddie. When it comes to Two-Face, Two-Face is just kind of like messier, so forth. Shoot a gun, shoot a bazooka, and this is who I am. So, like I said, I think if it came down to a fist fight or a gun battle, it's going to be Tommy Lee Jones, Two-Face. Your fourth matchup here is Batman Val Kilmer versus Poison Ivy. Now, Poison Ivy was played by Uma Thurman in Batman and Robin. I can easily say that it would probably be Batman Val Kilmer, but at the same time, though, if you look back to Batman and Robin, you'll see that, Poison Ivy, when Batman was in the lair, and yes, I know it was a different Batman, I know it was George Clooney, but that's just how this ended up happening. Batman got tied up by all the vines, and, Poison Ivy was about to escape. So I wouldn't rule out Poison Ivy in that. I might, I would say if I had to guess on that, I might say Poison Ivy just because of her, little crazy weeds, they probably tangle Batman up. I don't know. And it is Val Kilmer, and he's very emotionally driven. The next one would be Batman George Clooney versus Mr. Freeze. Now, this Mr. Freeze obviously is the only one we've had in the cinema. It was portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold's, Arnold's big. Batman, it wasn't so big at the time, versus him. Let's just say that, Mr. Freeze has all of his gun, his Arctic gun and whatever, maybe his Arctic car. In the movie Batman and Robin, Batman did beat him twice. So it might be Batman George Clooney. I would kind of like to see that just because. The next one is going to be Batman Christian Bale versus Scarecrow. Now, if you saw Batman Begins, you know kind of who won with that. I didn't want to do it so forth with Ra's al Ghul just because I think we knew that would be too good of a fight. Wanted to save that. I think that would be a better matchup for like at least the second, maybe even third round. So, I mean, I just want to, I don't want to say I cheated, but I want to say that I want to make sure Batman Christian Bale kind of gets to where he needs to be and not like get his ass kicked just so far yet. All right, number 7, Ra's al Ghul, who's portrayed by Liam Neeson, versus the Joker Heath Ledger. This one is probably one of the best matchups on here because Ra's al Ghul he's Ra's al Ghul. I mean, he never dies if you really think about it. Heath Ledger is, he comes from a different school of, say, terrorism and a baddie. The Joker is always one step ahead at the same time. So, it's gotta be the Joker in here. It's gotta be. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say on that one. Next one's going to be Two-Face, Aaron Eckhart versus Catwoman, Anne Hathaway. This would have been an interesting matchup, especially if they would have had this in The Dark Knight Rises. Say, Two-Face would have survived. I'm going to probably have to say Catwoman. Catwoman doesn't mind killing. At the same time, not saying that Two-Face didn't at the end when he became Two-Face instead of Harvey Dent. I think Catwoman has the fighting skills, and Harvey Two-Face he's too emotional. I think he's probably, let's just say that he's still worried about, or he has it on his mind, Rachel Dawes just died. So he's probably going to be like, oh, I lost my Rachel, Batman, whatever. So that's just my thought on that. Now this one, this is probably my second favorite on here, if not my top favorite. You guys are going to love this. Now, this is where we start crossing cinematic universes in the Batman movies. It is Bane, portrayed by Tom Hardy, versus Ben Affleck as the new Batman from Batman v Superman. You have two huge guys in here. Now, they made Tom Hardy look bigger in Batman, The Dark Knight Rises, but Ben Affleck, like we said at the beginning of the show, he is 6'4". He is huge, and he's all muscle, like super, super muscle. So that's easily a Friday night fight. I mean, if you would have taken that Bane versus Batman now, oh my God, that's like a UFC kind of fight. That's like, that is a grudge match right there. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I can't even decide on that. And besides, I'm getting short on time. Superman, Henry Cavill versus Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg. This one could be interesting. It depends on, like I said, we haven't even seen the movie yet, but I figured if we're putting on, villains and, technically Superman is a villain to Batman at the moment. So that's why I kind of put him on there. It's just kind of how things fell in place. Lex Luthor obviously is a villain, but we don't know how far in advance this Lex Luthor is. Does he have something like one of those suits that you saw further on in the comics? Does he have kryptonite just yet? We don't know. So I'm probably going to say Superman, because that'll end up being a Batman v Superman in our own little bracket, but we'll see. At the end of the Batman bracket is going to be Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot versus Doomsday. Now, like I said, spoiler, but it was already released in the trailer. Doomsday is going to pop in at the very end. Who knows? Maybe that's how the movie's going to end. They'll have their superhero pose. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman versus Doomsday. Who knows? And Lex Luthor gets away, or Doomsday gets away. But I thought it was a fair fight because, Doomsday in that trailer had the laser vision. Wonder Woman blocked it, and everybody's like, is she with you? No, I thought she was with you. So, who knows? Going on to the James Bond side, and we are in the 12th seed right now. It is 007 Sean Connery versus Dr. No. This one is going to be an easy pick just because I think everybody's got the love for Sean Connery. Dr. No, he was a good villain. He had the hands that could crush, metal and so forth, but I don't think that he's going to make it too far. I think it's easily going to be here, Sean Connery, just because, we know that he dropped him in that whatever, I think it was acid water. I'm not exactly sure. Another interesting matchup here is going to be a number 13, Red Grant Yeah, he's the same guy who was in Jaws. He was in From Russia with Love. He was the main villain here. He used to call Sean Connery old man, and I won't, Mr. Bond, you're gonna have to kiss my feet. And then versus Odd Job. How about that from Goldfinger? I think that would be an interesting one, but Odd Job's practically indestructible for a little guy with a top hat that can use that top hat to kill you when it hits your neck. So I'm gonna probably say Odd Job there, but I figured it was gonna be a good fight. Goldfinger, Goldfinger's Goldfinger, but if you put him versus number 2, which was Emilio Largo from Thunderball, I think you could have some fun. Largo probably might win this. Goldfinger, a little older, a little slower, a little bigger. Largo, older, yes, but I think that he was, looking at what he could do with the underwater fight, or him versus James Bond on the battle at the end of Thunderball, like with on the boat when it was like going all over the place in the water in the Bahamas. I'm going to go Largo on that, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. Next up is George Lazenby versus Kananga, Mr. Big, Live and Let Die. Yes, we skipped Blofeld. Like I said, don't worry, Blofeld's going to be fitting into this. It would be an interesting battle. I would imagine that everybody's going to pick George Lazenby in this, and that's okay. George had an interesting movie. One day I want to go back and review that movie and just, what I have to say on that. I've watched it at least a handful of times, and the more I watch it, the more I have respect for it. Maybe not so much as with him as a Bond, but just the story itself. Next up is Roger Moore versus Scaramanga. Now, this matchup might sound familiar because it really did happen in The Man with the Golden Gun. I think we know who's going to win there. Yes, the Man with the Golden Gun, he is the Man with the Golden Gun. He only needs one bullet. But if you go back to the Man with the Golden Gun, who ended up winning, but 007 in the end. So I think we'll have to go with Roger Moore there. Now, this one falls under an interesting one, and it's not my favorite matchup, but sometimes it has to be done. Jaws versus Carl Stromberg, and both of these are from The Spy Who Loved Me. Jaws is Jaws. No, that's not even a fight right there. I mean, Carl Stromberg, pretty much he was like a number 1. He was unofficially Blofeld if you look at it, but just an underwater version of him. Or he lived underwater, if you will. So Jaws is Jaws, and it takes a lot. He can kill a shark. He can bite somebody in the neck. He can pretty much do whatever. It's Jaws, and who knows? Maybe unofficially he did win, and he did live in Moonraker. I highly doubt it. Next one is going to be number 18. This is Hugo Drax, speaking of Moonraker, versus Max Zorin. Yes, I skipped a couple bad guys. Like I said, the more well-known these bad guys are, I figured it was better to put these in here as opposed to like your minor bad guys from like Octopussy, For Your Eyes Only. They were okay, but they weren't my favorite. But, to each his own. I'm going to have to go with Max Zorin in this one. The reason is because ex-KGB agent, he's definitely got some skills with weapons and so forth. Drax is kind of like a rich guy, and, I don't know. He needs a henchman. Zorin, not so much. Next one's going to be Timothy Dalton, who's your 007, versus Fran Sanchez. That's a good fight right there. If you ever saw License to Kill, you'll realize that, Fran Sanchez was, he was a really good bad guy, and still to this day, I don't think it's enough credit. I am probably going to go with Sanchez on that because he was smart. He was very violent. I mean, feeding somebody to a shark, which he fed Felix Leiter to the shark in there. If he ended up getting 007 caught, that Timothy Dalton, who was, he got captured a few times, so I'm going to say that Sanchez wins that, but I want to hear what you have to say. Finishing it up almost on C20, a couple more to go, so bear with me. Pierce Brosnan 007 versus 006 Alex Trevelyan. Wow, what a good fight that was. Looking back at GoldenEye, I mean, that was just, that might be one of the best on-screen fights in a Bond movie that we've ever had. Some will say that the new one, Inspector, Daniel Craig versus, Mr. Hinks, Dave Bautista, that is a tied fight, but this one was just, they're not the strongest, but they are agents, and they I remember hearing on, Mark and Campbell in an interview, just like, hey, just have at it, just fight each other, just make it look real. And boy, did they ever. So, it'll probably end up being Pierce, but 006, what a great Bond villain that was. Let's see, number 21, 007, Daniel Craig versus Lashif. It depends on how you look at this, because Bond did get caught by Lashif, and well, how do we say it politely? He got his ball scratched by Lashif. So, and if Mr. White wouldn't have saved him, then it might be Daniel Craig losing. But that was an early Bond, so let's give it to Daniel Craig just in case, or just because. Next one was going to be a good matchup. This one is Mr. White versus Mr. Hinks at number 22. I will say Mr. Hinks is probably going to win this, but I couldn't resist but to put Mr. White in there because he had such a history in the Daniel Craig era of films. Mr. Hinks, if you didn't see Spectre, first go ahead and see it, but this isn't too much spoiler, just that even from the trailers, you could see what he do. He kind of just grabbed somebody by the head and pushed something in, which looked like to be eyeballs, which really freaks me out right about now. Anyway, and then just broke his neck. He just, it was horrible. And you saw the beating that 007 took with that. So it's got to be Mr. Hinks. Maybe, not the best henchman, but still a good henchman. This one is going to be tough to say. It is the last one on number 23. Mr. Silva versus Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Now, like I said, all the Blofelds are put together in this, just so we could add a couple other characters in there. Because if I kept having Blofeld, and Blofeld, then that's no fun. We want to also, shed some light on the other baddies that were in there too. Silva was an ex-agent. Blofeld, not so much. Blofeld's kind of like the big boss, but he's also smart too. But I'm not saying that Silva isn't. Because of time here, I'm not going to choose that one just yet, but I do want to hear what you guys have to say. So please let me know on social media what you guys think about that. On to, let's see, we can't do scores just yet. We'll save the scores for another time, but I will say that the Batman versus Superman score is out there. It is freaking awesome. Some really cool themes on there. We kind of touched on it last week, and I'll give a quick apology because the episode for YouTube listeners out there played a track on there that apparently I wasn't supposed to. It happens. It got edited. It got corrected. Once I find a way that maybe I can start playing clips of music on here again, but I will say, go buy the Batman v Superman score, whether it's iTunes or however you do buy it, Amazon. Let's go into a quick review, and then we'll call it a night. All right, now this review, I said this from the beginning of the show. The title of this podcast is Batman versus James Bond Show. Having said that, though, I watched a movie last night and this morning, and it's still one of my favorite movies, and it is no technically about it. It's a prequel to the new Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice movie. It is called Man of Steel. It is a Superman movie. Now, how do I get around talking about this movie when I just said this is a Batman versus James Bond show? I don't know. I've been wrecking my brain about it, but I won't go too much into it. I will say that there are plenty of little Easter eggs of Wayne Tower. There is a Wayne satellite, which kind of clears me from, being able, or allows me to talk about this. I will say that, Man of Steel is a great, great movie. I can't get enough of that. It gets better every time I watch that movie. I have so much massive respect for that. I won't go too much into it. Other than that, I will just say that everything that happened, if you watch that movie, hopefully you did like it like I did, those events are going to be portrayed in the new Batman versus Superman movie. So everything with Superman, it showed how Superman became Superman. The fight sequences in there are insane. The CGI was done very well with that. Now, if you put those kind of fight sequences into versus Batman versus, Superman, then wow, I can't wait to see what's in store for us. So pretty much what Man of Steel was about is how Superman became Superman, and he was only Superman for a couple days, and then all of a sudden, General Zod, who was played by Michael Shannon in that movie, which was a great villain, he was after something called the Codex, and what that was just, Krypton was destroyed, and that's why Kal-El, Superman, was sent to Earth as a baby. So General Zod is after this Codex, which is also, in Clark Kent, Superman. And, Clark Kent was never aware of this, but at the same time, he's like, okay, well, Krypton had its chance, and Zod, you're only interested in yourself. While General Zod does have, he's not just after like world domination. It's more about saving his species, if you will, saving his people, his race of Kryptonians, and going all through that. If you fast forward to the end, it's all about the fight sequence at the end that ends up going through Metropolis and obviously through Gotham. Now, when Batman v Superman is going to pick up, I have a feeling, and this is speculation, so I have not seen it, I have not read any spoilers, and even if they were out there, I wouldn't be talking about them on here. I will say, though, if I had to make a guess right now, you're going to see at the beginning of Batman v Superman, as we saw in the trailer, you're going to start seeing it from Batman. I almost said Ben Affleck, same thing. You're going to see all those events, the fight sequences, Metropolis and so forth, all the destruction from the buildings and so forth, from his point of view, from Batman's point of view. And we're going to say, oh my God, this alien just all of a sudden came into our lives and just destroyed our city and just didn't care and about, people dying and so forth. So that's what I'm going with when I say Man of Steel, is like the prequel. It's because all those events are the reason Batman is now coming out of retirement. So if you think about it, it's like, okay, Batman does have a good point here. Superman didn't, however, mean to cause all this destruction. It was just kind of came on him. So, I'll leave it at that. If you guys do get a chance to see that movie, please let me know what you think. I think it's a great movie. I think if you are a Batman fan, I think you're going to like it because it's in the same vein as because it was written by Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer, who penned all three Dark Knight trilogy movies. It kind of takes the flashbacks, kind of like how Batman Begins did in a sense. But at the same time, it is a Superman movie, but it is also setting up everything that's about to happen in Batman v Superman, where Superman will have to answer for all the destruction that he did to the Dark Knight. Anywho, though, that about wraps it up for this longer extended episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. Please subscribe on iTunes and or Spreaker, however you listen to this. Please make sure that you rate this show and leave a comment. Please leave me that 5-star review, guys. Please let me know how I'm doing. I would very much appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Batman vs. Bond and like me on the Batman vs. James Bond Facebook page. Like James Bond, I will return. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, peace out. Please go see Batman v Superman. I'm going to see it Thursday night. I hope you do too. When we come back on the next week's episode, we will go all out on nothing but Batman v Superman. James Bond fan, don't worry. I will not leave you hanging. I will find something for us to talk about and so forth. But in the meantime, check you later, guys. Have a great week. Bye-bye.